Welcome to the interview, Daria. It's great to have you. Let's start with your experience dealing with the public and businesses. Can you tell me about a time when you demonstrated excellent customer service?
Thank you. Yes, of course. So, in my highways role at ERYC, I manage skip and scaffolding license applications. Now, most of my customer communication was actually by email. A situation that came up, well, quite regularly, really, was when a company submitted an application, but the location simply wasn't suitable. For example, the road might be too narrow for the skip size they requested, or maybe there was a parking restriction right near the property. My task was to process these efficiently without causing any unnecessary delays for the client.
So rather than simply rejecting the application outright, I would check the map myself and identify the nearest suitable alternative location. I would then send the company a clear email explaining exactly why their original spot wasn't possible and suggest the alternative, asking them to confirm if it worked for them. As a result, the company didn't have to spend time searching for another location themselves, which was especially helpful when they needed the skip placed quickly. It kept the process moving without unnecessary delays. Okay, let's hit pause on the interview for just a quick second. Did you notice what Daria did there? It absolutely brilliantly illustrates the power of a proactive mindset. By providing a specific first-person anchor, like rather than simply rejecting, it gives language learners an exact phrase to emulate that shows real initiative, not just blind obedience. All right, let's jump back in.
That's a really great example of being proactive, Daria. Now, working in a council environment naturally means juggling a lot of different tasks. How do you manage your time when you have a number of competing demands?
Well, I am quite a visual person, so I rely heavily on visual tools to organize my work. At ERYC, I would start each day by checking my emails and the Causeway dashboard. The volume of applications varied greatly, sometimes 8, sometimes up to 20 requests in a single day. I would always prioritize short-notice applications that needed processing the exact same working day. Alongside this, I had mandatory e-learning courses. To manage this, I used my Outlook calendar to track training deadlines and schedule team meetings, ensuring I used any quieter moments to complete my learning rather than leaving it to the last minute. Previously, at the property platform RIA.com, we worked in 2-week agile sprints. We had daily stand-up meetings to discuss our progress and any blockers. I used Trello task boards where every task had a specific card, a deadline, and an assigned person. By clearly laying things out visually, whether on a Causeway dashboard or a Trello board, I ensured those competing priorities are always managed effectively.
Excellent use of specific software tools there. Now, moving on to compliance and attention to detail. Obviously, in this role, you'll be handling data. How do you keep sensitive information secure? And can you tell me about a time when you have had to produce highly accurate work? How did you achieve this? I firmly believe the first step to accurate work is building systems that actually prevent mistakes. For instance, in my highways role, rather than typing fresh responses for recurring issues like additional parking bay charges, I created my own standardized reference tables and email templates. This ensured total consistency. Furthermore, as a non-native English speaker, I use spell-check and, where appropriate, Copilot. However, I only did this after ERYC ran a specific training session confirming internal information was protected, and I never, ever included personal customer data.
But, I also know mistakes do happen. Recently at ERIC, I realized I was miscalculating deadline dates. I was actually mixing up working days and calendar days. Once I noticed, I told my manager, Carl, immediately. Then I created an Excel auto formula that calculated the correct date automatically to prevent it from ever happening again. Similarly, back at RIA.com, I found an accounting error that added extra zeros to client payments. Because the system created entries on both sides, I had to report it immediately so developers could clean the records. My rule is basically this: a mistake might seem small in isolation, but if you quietly fix the surface issue without telling anyone, it can create a snowball effect affecting other departments or even financial records.
Time out. Okay, the crucial point we need to look at right here is Daria's use of the phrase snowball effect. Look, admitting a mistake, explaining exactly who you told, like her manager Carl, and showing the systemic fix you built, like that Excel formula, that is an absolute masterclass in interview psychology. It is so much more powerful than pretending you are perfect. You're actually showing them you are a totally safe pair of hands when things inevitably go wrong. Let's move to our next core competency, Daria. Cross-departmental collaboration is absolutely vital here. Can you tell me about a time you contributed to a team's achievement?
Yes, I have a really strong example from my time at RII.com. The company was going through a major redesign. The development teams were working under very ambitious deadlines, and each department, developers, sales, and client managers, was strictly focused on hitting their own KPIs.
The problem was that customer complaints and bug reports were coming in through our Kiyako ticketing system, but because everyone was focused on their own goals, non-critical user bugs were completely ignored. Client managers were frustrated with unhappy customers, and developers felt pressure to just deliver new features. The teams were operating entirely in silos. As part of the SLA team, my colleague and I noticed these recurring tickets. To get a clearer picture, I created a structured Google Sheets table to categorize and count the incoming requests by feature, page, and type of issue. What had previously been just an unorganized queue in Kayako suddenly became a trackable dataset. Once I visualized the patterns, I started bringing this data directly to our daily stand-up meetings. I presented the numbers and the screenshots. Because the data spoke for itself, the development team finally began allocating specific time within their agile sprints for incoming critical issues, rather than only working on pre-planned tasks. The result was highly measurable. We saw a 20% reduction in complaint severity. Client managers noticed issues were actually getting resolved, which really reduced the tension between departments. For me, though, the biggest achievement wasn't just the numbers. It was seeing two departments that had been pulling in opposite directions finally communicate and work together towards a common goal based on the data I provided.
Wow, that is a phenomenal example of using data to bridge communication gaps. Thank you, Daria. Well, that brings us to the end of our formal questions today. Do you have any questions for us?
Yes, I do actually. Based on the council's move towards more agile ways of working, could you tell me how the parking operations team currently handles its internal feedback loops?